Okay, hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the second session of Sunoikisis Digital Classics, Summer 2020. Today we have a guest. Our guest is my colleague, Dimitar. He's professor of classics at the University of Sofia, and he will teach a session about digital classics in teaching before and now. And as usual, you have the class online in GitHub, where you have a description of the outline, reference materials, readings, and an exercise. And this session is meant to present through the experience of the Department of Classics at the University of Sofia, the role of teaching digital classics in general. And our program, Sunoikisis Digital Classics, is an international program for applying technologies to the study of ancient Greek and Latin sources. We run the program, we have been running the program since 2014, but today, especially this semester where we have this situation due to the coronavirus, we want to discuss the possibilities that we have today to teach digital classics. So this is a new topic in some way in our program. And we have, I can introduce my colleague, Dimitar. You already know him because he has been contributing a lot to Sunoikisis Digital Classics. And this academic year, he has been helping Gabriel Bodar before for the spring semester, and now he's helping me with this semester. And before introducing Demeter, I think it's possible that there is again a problem with the link in YouTube, and I apologize our listeners for this. In any case, if you are listening to this video, of course you are on the right link. For those who were able to join the session later, I apologize for this mistake. In any case, you can find the correct link in our class outline. But Demeter in the chat is telling me that now the YouTube link is working correctly. And I have to say that on YouTube, there is a message that's considering the current situation due to the COVID-19 crisis, we can have problems on the YouTube channel. Of course, every one of us has these problems today. Anyway, now we are ready to start, and I'm very happy to welcome back Dimitar. Dimitar, welcome back to Sunoikisis, and you can start.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you for the nice introduction. Now I will try to share the screen.
Okay.
It should be working.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Should see
okay. Yes, I can see the screen, and now, okay, is just your screen.
Hello everybody. I'm trying to the topic of today will be divided in two main parts. One part is to describe the social challenges that humanities as a whole, and especially classics, are facing nowadays, which are all too familiar to a lot of people who study and teach classics. And now, probably in the current health crisis and in its aftermath, they will be even more severe. And I will I'll discuss ways with you in which introducing digital instruments in the teaching and learning of classics as a part of the curriculum could address especially these social problems. And lastly, we will discuss what are we to do now in these times of lockdown, which as Monica also mentioned, are changing the way we are working and changing the way we are teaching and learning. So without further ado, I'm starting with the well-known commonplace of the crisis in the humanities. We've discussed this on several international forums recently, the last of which was in Skopje just before the pandemic and the lockdown. And even before that, as you can see, the sustainable goals that are nationally and internationally on all levels put before societies, policies, governments, and etc., which are also on the level of European Union set as priorities by the European Commission, include very important and very crucial things, which will become even more crucial in the light of today's crisis, as the reduction of poverty, the reduction of hunger, access to health, universal access to health, clean water and sanitation, biodiversity, peace, sustainable cities, responsible consumption and production, etc., etc., and among them, quality in education. But especially as people who are in the field of humanities, we would ask ourselves, what does education, and especially humanitarian education, means in the light of these global challenges, which have been around for decades now, and which are very important for the development of our countries, of Europe, and of the world as a whole. And especially as some fields, such as health and security issues, will probably exacerbate in the future. And this is all too well seen in the career choices that many of us do on micro levels, not only on the big global macro level, in terms of education, especially education in classics. This is a famous passage of a work which was published several years ago, crucial and yet a bit controversial, maybe, work of Paul Jay, a literary critic, a literary theorist, The Humanities Crisis and the Future of Literary Studies, when he states the now accepted truth that the intangible value of an education in history, philosophy, literature, and the fine arts is of decreasing interest to families worried about their children's employment prospects. Studying the humanities disciplines seems backward-looking and without any utility in an age of exploding technology. For this reason, students are flocking to the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the so-called STEM sciences, STEM disciplines, because, unlike the humanities, they are forward-looking. So we see that, and university staff is feeling it in all the academic institutions around the globe, that the humanities and classics in particular, as part of the humanities, is in some sort of crisis for many decades now, and that teaching classics and studying classics can be quite challenging, especially in view of what we sometimes think of as one of the greatest advantages of classical education and of Altertumswissenschaft as a whole, but which could also be its significant weakness. Classical education is often presented, and we, especially the classical departments, including in Bulgaria, we often advertise it to our students and to our colleagues in academia as the foundation of European culture and foundation of good education, which, on the other hand, historically means that this was the foundation of good education in the past several centuries, coming with all the pluses and the minuses and all the burden of being something which is exclusive, elitist, hard to achieve, and in many ways maybe backwards and not conforming to the ways of our society as it is today, which tends to be more egalitarian, more pluralistic, more inclusive, more open, or at least this is the ideal that we want it to be. This is an article from the online journal for contemporary issues in classics, Eidolon, which I'm again quoting, which is by an American classicist, J. Bracey, Why Students of Color Don't Take Latin. And there is a significant passage which explains the particularities of this issue, as well as explains very well other issues that we are facing even in countries when this issue as such doesn't exist. Latin has a reputation, I quote again, Latin has a reputation for being a language for the smart kids, a place where the best and brightest go to further set themselves apart from the pack. Since Latin classes, in most instances, are not mandatory, the people signing up tend to be a self-selected group of elite students. Except for the occasional outliers, the overwhelming majority of these students are going to be the most advantaged students in the district. Who else is going to self-identify as one of the smart kids? So in current years, and we also have such a session in the framework of Sunoikisis DC recently, classical studies in Europe and the United States in particular have undergone a process of re-estimating their priority towards more inclusiveness, more openness, and better ways to integrate people who are from different kinds of minorities, from social groups which are disadvantaged and unprivileged in various respects. And the program of decolonizing classics has been a major issue now for decades. And rethinking the way we conceive of Europe's classical past, illustrated by this nice portrait and very famous in the program of classical decolonization of Saint Augustine by Pietro di Giovanni d'Ambrogio, where you can see Saint Augustine set by his native Berber background, as if set until against his native Berber background. This is also one of the challenges we are facing today. And another thing I would like to stress that traditionally, and this is linked also with the values of high quality and elitist and exclusive education, the figure of the classical scholar, as represented here by a portrait of Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam by Quentin Masses, this figure is stereotyped, quite justly, I have to say, as somebody who has the luxurious position, who has obtained the luxurious position to delve deeply into and quietly and thoroughly into their studies, to have a lot of time at their disposal to pore over the books of ancient authors, and is not in a hurry to produce knowledge and to yield results, which goes in many cases in conflict with today's culture, including academic culture, which aims at, and we are pressured to do this as academics on all levels, students included sometimes, to yield results in short term, to yield results based on piecework in separate particular projects. And in general, we are dealing with some people in the higher education have compared to the fast food culture, justly or not. But I will use that metaphor to say something about the reaction which these fast food culture has been facing in recent years. In recent years, there is a backlash against this ideal for efficiency and for fast results by the so-called slow food movement, which emphasizes the slow production and the leisurous consumption of local food, emphasizes quality over results, and emphasizes a different set of values than fast food. But are we going to experience a revival and a backlash of slow research, when we will have the leisure to spend decades over our texts and researching our favorite subjects and getting educated very thoroughly and very deeply into our preferred fields of expertise in order to yield results which are not fast but which could be more thorough? And this is something which, in contrast with the slow food backlash, I say that we probably wouldn't be able to expect, at least in recent decades. And another problem which many students are also familiar with is the early student employment, which has been more and more predominant with the years, and which also takes away time from the students in which they can spend a lot of work on their subjects in order to produce better results. So both teachers and students are now forced by the employment market and by the social structure of people who do BA and all the more MA studies at the universities to be able to produce fast results in education, probably not at the expense of the quality and of education. So how do we do that? This is something that the departments of classics all over the Western world and in the world as a whole have been trying to answer. At Sofia, here we can see the link to our site of the Department of Classics at the University of Sofia. Unfortunately, the thing which is of interest to the things we are discussing in this session is only in Bulgarian, but you will have to take my word for it. We have recently made a reform in our curriculum in order to make it more attractive to students who would then like to combine it with other type of studies in an interdisciplinary fashion, to be able to receive competences in a quality way, not at the expense of the deepness and the thoroughness of the competences and the knowledge that they receive, but as fast as they could, and to open many possible career choices before them. So we have preserved a basic core of obligatory disciplines, and this is something in progress, and we are now trying to see what the results will be, and in 2 or 3 years we will know better. But we have now the first preliminary results, which are promising. The first students which are taking this new BA curriculum will will find a lot of new directions for their further development. So the basic core of obligatory disciplines, of course, Greek and Latin language, of course, Greek and Roman literature, cultural studies of Greece and Rome, and several others, and several optional modules which put the studying of classics into a wider perspective and give different options of combining it then with different types of MA studies in order to acquire competences which are wider than just being a narrow specialist in classics. For example, we have an optional module which is history, archaeology, philosophy, and law. We have a module which is cultural literature and media, a module which is languages, linguistics, and translation studies, and last but not least, the main topic of my presentation today, we have digital classics. So I'll just concentrate, without giving you any further details about the other parts of the curriculum, on the digital classics module, which strictly consists of several areas of study. The study of the available online resources in the teaching and research of antiquity, the study of the available digital tools that could be used in classical studies, which are things like text alignment, tree banking, and annotation tools, and an optional course which deals with the XML encoding of ancient monuments according to the standards of EpiDoc, we will see in a while. And of course, a little bit of self-referencing here, but I cannot help it since this is an essential part of our study. We make wide use of the sessions and exercises available on these topics in the framework of Sunoikisis Digital Classics since 2015, from 2015 on. Now, a few words about each of these and how could this help receive training of high quality and as much time sparing as possible. First, what we do use is annotation with Recogito. I'm starting with the simpler tools, which are really intuitive to learn and which do not require a lot of preliminary practice from students in order to get themselves orientated into them, but which can yield impressive results, or at least results which are unexpected, and then they can add to the study of Greek and Latin texts and cultural phenomena which the students deal with in the other disciplines that they study in parallel. So all of this is something which complements the study of Greek and Latin texts and monuments, which takes place in other disciplines, which the students are taking at the same time. The Recogito tool, you can see the link to it. We have several presentations also in the past years and past semesters of Sunoikisis, and there is a thorough documentation on how to use Recogito and what you can do with it, accompanied by some video tutorials also. But it could be used to annotate, and technically then you can export the annotation in different formats. But this is something beyond the scope of the presentation I'm making today, and it requires a bit more technical skills in order to know what to do with the exported material in, say, TI-XML after that. But here we're only on the user end of stuff, but you annotate, and then you can visualize your annotations of either texts or images. And this is an example, for example, of how image annotation works. For image annotation, it is very useful, and this is from last year, to work on historical maps. Pelagios Recogito is linked to the gazetteer for ancient places, which is currently widely available and of use for many purposes, the Pleiades gazetteer. You can annotate an image of an ancient map. For example, here you see a snapshot of a common exercise we have made to annotate places and to identify places, thanks to Pleiades, on the so-called Tabula Peutingeriana, which is a medieval copy of a late antique map. One of the few extant examples of ancient maps that we have nowadays. And I have worked this with several students, and we had a really useful time in not only trying to get right the technicalities of marking and annotating a section or a point on the map, but also with getting introduced beyond the technical details, getting introduced to what we can know about ancient cartography and the description of ancient places and the representation of the places in ancient documents, in ancient and medieval documents, I have to say, which is very different from our intuitions of what we have nowadays. For example, the students get introduced to the fact that the projection of the contemporary maps was something that was non-existent in antiquity and in the Middle Ages, and it couldn't be existent under any conditions. And also that searching and identifying a place on an ancient and medieval document like this is not as straightforward as it seems, especially when you go beyond the very famous ancient places, the Capita Mundi, so to say, such as Rome and Constantinople, and maybe Mediolanum and other famous places like this. This is a document which actually documents very well the provincial road network in the Roman Empire, from the westernmost provinces until these parts are now lost, but until further on the Silk Road, outside the borders of the late antique Roman Empire, even reaching India. But once you get out on the road network from the places which are well known, you need to think a bit before being able to identify certain places, especially places which are not that popular, and the names of which the cartographers, somewhere in the manuscript tradition of this Tabula Peutingeriana, at many places got wrong. For example, here you see a snapshot of Mycenae or Mycenae, which is identified on the map, but you have to look for it, because neither by the place of this settlement on the map, nor by the name, which was gotten wrong either in late antiquity already, or maybe by some of the medieval copyists, you can get a clear idea of what this place is. I don't know how well you can see here, but on the medieval copy of this map, we have something like Mia Cenis, or something like this. So the students had a great, and I hope useful time in trying to identify places like this and juxtapose them to one another as they lay on the roadmap, especially in the Balkan provinces of the Roman Empire, where a lot of cities in today's Bulgaria lie even nowadays. And I hope that from this exercise we got something useful as an experience in the respect of facing ancient and medieval documents in this long document transmission as they are, and trying to make out of them what we can. Especially comparing them with maps as they exist nowadays, and the manuscript tradition as it exists in editions of ancient medieval texts nowadays. Another thing which is this is especially good for is annotating, of course, texts. And now I'm gonna stop the presentation and show you some texts which on which we are working on currently. This is the Recogito annotation coursework and hand-on experience from this year, which consists in annotating the first chapters of Tacitus Agricola, which is read in one of the Latin language courses in parallel to our course. And for those of you who are familiar with this writing of this work, you know that geographical entities dealing with places and place names are not that much, and many of them are a bit general, like whole provinces such as Asia, Britannia, or Aquitania, and places like that, which are not that hard and maybe not that fun to identify. But we have a lot of personal names, some of which are really hard to identify. And because we don't have a lot of ancient prosopographies which are on, so to say, on public display and easy to be used by the end users in the way that, for example, the gazetteers for place names are very helpful and very easy to use by pretty much everybody who reaches them, reaches their web pages. The personal names and the persons are another story altogether. So sometimes it is really hard to identify a person. And Pleiades is not, Recogito is not linked to any prosopography that would readily identify a person for you. So in the annotation themselves, the students have to specify to...
And Dimitar, sorry for interrupting. Can you slightly zoom in just a bit, because we can read it on YouTube, maybe just a slight zoom in, if you can.
Let me see. I have to.
I have to say that we can read it, and if people in YouTube have problems, please let me know. But, okay.
Okay, I'm trying now, but I'm not sure if I will succeed. Okay, now.
Yes. Yes. Now is better. Thank you. And okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Agricola by Tacitus is a very good way to get introduced if you have to do your annotation properly to do your research and get introduced to the prosopography of the early empire in the way, at least, as Tacitus tried to present it, and the people he was interested in, and the people he presented and described in his works. But as I told you, you have to search in order to identify the persons themselves. And here, one of the students which are currently working on this writing, she has taken her time to not only annotate and link the persons to the available information for them as it exists on public sites, such as on Wikipedia. We have a lot of articles concerning some of the people covered in the first 10 chapters of Tacitus Agricola, but sometimes we don't have, and you have to search for other sources, and then you have to check if these sources are correct, and you have to check and sometimes double check. And on many occasions, she has been able to also identify the existing ID of the person in the Prosopographia Imperii Romani. This is something I should perhaps reference also in the wiki page of this session. But this is most of it is an offline prosopography, but you have at least the basic functionalities and the search option in the corpus up and running at the site of the Prosopographia Imperii Romani. So this is a good way also to get acquainted with prosopographies, not all of which are already put online, but which for certain periods of history, for example, the early empire, are indispensable. And one who studies texts and monuments from this period will have to get acquainted with them more or less in sooner or later. Here you see the, of course, Vespasianus, which is a very famous historical figure, and you cannot possibly go wrong with him. But here you see not only publicly available article in the English language Wikipedia on it, but you also see the correctly identified peer ID. And you also get used in this way to the fact that it doesn't matter if your gazetteer or your prosopography is analog or digital. The main point of these documents, of these tools, is to give a unique identification to every named entity that could use the same name as others. And without further ado, I'm now going to show you another exercise a student has done. He has taken.
And Dimitar, sorry, I interrupt you again, but because I have a curiosity also for our listeners. So before you were showing, you of course, well, personal names. You mentioned Prosopographia Imperii Romani, and I think that at some point there was a reference, I think, to a Bulgarian resource. Probably I missed that before. So just to mention a variety of resources that you are using, because you mentioned the Prosopographia, then of course Wikipedia. So to see how many different resources we can use today to build authority lists for personal names. And if I'm not wrong, there was I don't remember the name.
I'm not sure where.
Okay.
But for example, I can show you this Domitia Decidiana, which is the wife of Agricola.
Okay.
At some point, maybe here or maybe in some other point, there was a person which could not be found in.
Exactly. In this case, if you go back.
maintenance resource, which was Feminae Romanae or something like that, which this student used, which is a really good attempted prosopography of female historical and literary characters from the late Republic and the Empire. So there are really a variety of resources. Yeah,
no, because I can't read Bulgarian, sorry, and I could see after the reference to the prosopographia, there was, I think, a reference to the Bulgarian resource. Probably, as you said before, this is important. We can use both analog and digital resources. So if we have references to printed editions, we can include them, because this is a first effort to begin to include references to resources that will be hopefully digitized in the future. So that's why I wanted to mention this, because this is important, especially for including resources in other languages.
Yes, yes. It's a very strong point, and this is a very good way to get around using scholarly literature, be it put online, which is a very good thing to do, or offline, even if it does not exist online. And it's much easier to get used to quoting your sources properly when you have a hands-on experience like this, rather than just going straight to the task of browse through some books here. I think it always helps when you have some other activity on which you're focused. And this is an exercise which basically I didn't actually expect for it to turn so, but this is another student of ours from last year who produced a place identification of named entity tagging of the whole corpus of Horatian odes. So all the place names that are mentioned in the 4 book of odes by Horace in the original language, but I have to say that it also works in other languages, including but the automatic recognition by Pleiades is harder in such cases, but nothing stops you from doing your annotations manually in German or in Bulgarian or in Georgian, Croatian, and Portuguese, I don't know what. And if you have an exercise like this, then you get, of course, here we have a whole continent such as Europe and Asia and Africa tagged, but you see a lot of smaller places. And by visualizations like this, you can get a sense of, so to say, the mental map of Horace's odes and his readers, the places and the range of places, which was interesting for this Roman poet and for his audience, and the network of places which this poetry represents and presents and describes. And maybe this could be a good opportunity for further studies. Which places are most mentioned? Where are the greatest clusters of mentioned places? And why so? And does it have something to do with the particularities of genre, of author, and of audience, and probably of the historical period and of the cultural horizons of the educated Romans by that time, the time of the early empire? Another, now, just not to waste time, another instrument that which is very useful in such types of studies is the type of instrument which is very useful is alignment tools. And I will here present the Ugarit alignment tool, which was more thoroughly presented in one of the sessions of the previous semester. And here's a snapshot of it. And the use of working with such an alignment tool, which can align simple words or whole phrases, is really not in need of much explanations, as the students are getting their way through translations from Latin or ancient Greek. They can use ready-made translations, or maybe I can still make this bigger. Here you can see bilingual translations of Latin and Bulgarian pairs. And here you can see also trilingual translations of Latin, Bulgarian, and English. In the latter case, I think translations which were already available in Bulgarian and English were used. But it is also possible for the students to use their own translations, in this way they can control sort of their translation output. But if you also use translations which are done before, or some of them are published, and you compare them with translations in other languages, such as Bulgarian and English, Bulgarian and German, English and German, I think Ugarit can do up to 3. This is how you can compare not only the character and the type and the quality maybe of the translations available, but you get a sense of how the languages compared to each other work, especially if contrasting the way certain phrases are rendered into one or most languages, which requires different syntactic connections for the different languages, different distribution of words in a sentence, and different word order somewhere, and different ratio of words used in the original and in the target languages. And this is something which is becomes very obvious once you start putting your translations paired with the original on a platform like this. And the third thing, which is actually the most complex and the most ambitious endeavor in the framework of this set of digital classic courses, is teaching EpiDoc and connecting it with the Telamon collection of ancient Greek inscriptions from Bulgaria. Here you see a specimen of one of these inscriptions encoded in EpiDoc XML according to the guidelines of EpiDoc XML, which have been actually an object of several sessions in Sunoikisis, including 2 from the last semester. And there is a whole lot of not only guidelines, but also training materials available, especially the presentations which are collected on the EpiDoc page of the Digital Classicist Wiki, which you have quoted in the resources, among the resources for this session. And the specific thing here is that first you have to work with the printed sources, which are really bulky and which are really not that easy, especially for BA students to get acquainted with. These are the 5 volumes of the Greek inscriptions found in Bulgaria, or Inscriptiones Graecae in Bulgaria Repertae, which is the main corpus of these inscriptions written in Latin and published by Georgi Mikhailov. Here you see a typical entry from this corpus. The meta language is Latin, which sometimes does not help if you want to get acquainted with the particularities of the text right away. And we also have other monographs which can serve as addenda et corrigenda to Mikhailov's volume, which in many respects and in many instances is now a bit out of date, but still a very indispensable tool in learning Greek epigraphy in Bulgaria. For example, here you see one of the most recent studies, Notes on the Greek Inscriptions from Bulgaria by Nikolai Sharankov. So basically what you have to do, and it's published in English, and it's actually openly available, and I will also have to add this to the list of literature quoted in this presentation. So from this, the point is to get these inscriptions into an XML encoded version and include them in the dataset which is currently available on GitHub. And now we have the beta version of our website, which displays the inscriptions which are included in this collection, which you can download and run through FS from our GitHub page. So in between that, you have to include the course which teaches the students how to encode inscriptions in order to yield some very practical results. And I don't know if this is well displayed, but this is how the workflow into which the course is integrated looks like. The students are trained to encode ancient Greek inscriptions in XML, which means they are also trained to read the corpora of inscriptions themselves, which are in Latin, in English, and there are some articles in Bulgarian and also in other languages, to make sense of them, to compile the information from them. Of course, this is all monitored by me and by other more senior researchers in our projects, to encode it in XML, to include, according to a template, which is available to them, to get the revisions and additions that take place in the process straight. And then, after the correction of the inscriptions, to load them into the customized FS platform of Telemon, which will eventually, we're getting our hands on it now, serve as an online publication of these inscriptions. And this is really a very sensible way to both try to get students acquainted with the complex field of Greek epigraphy as much as possible, get them acquainted with XML encoding by the way of trial and error sometimes, but they are getting better and better now, and make them contribute to a real research project which is going on. So what is the gist of all this, and what is the use of all this? All these tools, from the simplest one to the most complex, which I showed you last, I think first makes up for the decline of slow learning and research by the introduction of hands-on experience, of heuristic problem solving, which somehow helps students in less time acquire the same or at least comparable competences which some decades ago had to be acquired by a very slow and very devoted study, for which basically current research and education does not have enough time. It builds practical skills, which not only helps the students to then get better orientated, how to proceed with their research or professional career, but also gives a very good sense of feeling happy with the production of some palpable results. Of course, encourages teamwork and interdisciplinarity, which is a commonplace thing to say about such type of activities. Open various career perspectives, which can complement very well with the classical education, and has the additional benefit in some cases, like the XML training that I showed you last, involve students in current research which is now happening, and also in keeping students busy with a lot of new practical skills, also keeps them close to their specialized educational field, because they have to acquire a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills in the field of classics and Altertumswissenschaft in general, while at the same time getting better and better in annotation or inscription encoding and things like that. And this, I have to say, holds true not only for the inclusion of students, be it on BA or MA level or doctoral students, in current projects which are already underway at your department or faculty or research institutions, but also to try to think of topics and of sets of materials and data and texts and whatever, which could become a possible object of a research project. So it's not necessary, it helps immensely, I have to say, but it's not necessary to have some current research project going on. You can make it out if it's not already underway. And now, some thoughts about the situation we are in now. 3 points which I would like to make, and 2 or 3 things in addition I would like to propose. Some of which we are currently exploiting with our students as possibilities, and some of which I have in mind to apply in the future, in the weeks to come. Now, it so happened, for better or for worse, in our field and in the digital humanities field and the digital classics field that we are currently discussing, that all of a sudden digital tools are the only tools currently available which everybody has to deal with and everybody has to use, which means that a lot of things which have been going on in this area since a lot of time ago are now things which suddenly become very important and very relevant, and things which would be something that a lot of people will want and will have to learn. This, of course, is good, but there is also something which probably could be confirmed by a lot of people who are following this presentation, both teachers and students, that you can, the tendency is nowadays to feel a bit overwhelmed by a lot of online stuff which have suddenly become available, a lot of possibilities which suddenly are open before us, and a lot of information influx which suddenly burdens us with the proposition for participation and active engagement and learning new stuff, new platforms, and producing new stuff and new results, which is something that paradoxically could make times of quarantine even worse if we don't watch out for this than the normal workload that we had before the lockdown of basically the whole world. So in addition to these instruments which require some active participation, I propose here some things which take things more on the consumer side and put us in the role of more or less not the producers, but the active consumers or the prosumers, which is a very trendy term, first introduced in the 1980s, I think, by Alvin Toffler, but which is very, very relevant to the stage of Web 2.0, the socially connected web, which we have nowadays. So, for example, several things which I'm trying to do now in Sofia, and which I'm proposing as an exercise, is, for example, to start not by trying to first produce something, but trying to first search for available information and then maybe produce something out of it. The concept of a prosumer is somebody who consumes and produces at the same time a part of what he or she consumes. And it's a very appropriate way to describe, for example, somebody who mines for information on certain topics in the platforms in platforms which have a part connected with with contribution to them available on the web. For example, Wikimedia Commons, or platforms such as Pinterest or Flickr. For example, if you search, I'm deliberately not talking here about textual sources and resources, because we've all very deeply imbued with text, more or less, when we talk about classics. But now let's think of some image or multimedia search, and concentrate on that. For example, on certain topics, it is a very good idea to try and find some multimedia image or video or audio information in Wikimedia Commons, where a lot of this information is readily available. And you can see the things such as, for example, this map of archaic Greece, which we discussed with our students last week, and try to see how you can use it. If you can use it, to what extent you can use it. For example, the metadata to the image, including the available licenses which codify, so to say, the way in which you can use and reuse the image, and the reliability and the quality of the information that you found. For example, you can when you search for this deliberately faulty example I have chosen for you, and we discussed it with the students last week. Why are there problems with, for example, this map of archaic Greece? And you're invited to then go to the discussion, which discusses why this image and this representation of the distribution of settlements and tribal territories in archaic Greece could be problematic. And you have here a discussion of, well, basically there's one user who has discussed this issue, and he also quotes literature, which you can then check back and see to what extent he is right or not. But there are also some other social platforms where there are great collections, and you yourself can make such collection. You can aggregate such materials by topics. For example, the social media called Pinterest, where you can search for visual materials of all sorts, really all sorts. It is of course not exclusively connected with the ancient world or classics or anything like this. You can search for contemporary images of pop stars, for example, or Instagram models and things like that, but also a lot of people and a lot of websites where this platform extracts information from contain materials which can be used in your collection. If you make yourself a Pinterest profile, you can make different collections of, say, I have here Latin. This is my profile: Latin inscription, Greek pottery, Greek inscriptions, and etc., etc. And all of these are images which are from different sources. They are uploaded by users. They are aggregated from some other platforms, some of them by museums, and with information of differing quality, differing detailedness, and in different languages also, as you probably can see here. And then you can interact with other users who have similar collections. And this is something that Pinterest aggregates for you. And you can see similar materials. For example, this is a Roman painting, which are collected and distributed by these users. And you can also find other collections when a given image is also preserved, is also pinned, as they say on this platform, or saved, which could be relevant also to expand and explore your own collection. And this could be a very useful and very interesting way to gather visual materials about a certain topic, a certain object, or a person, or a place, or historical period. And all the way while doing this, paying information about the quality and the sources where this information comes from, because this site, which aggregates a lot of images, could aggregate images of differing usefulness for the topics that you have chosen to present or to illustrate. Another such platform is, for example, Flickr, when you can also, it's mainly for artistic photography, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. You can find a lot of groups on Flickr. It's mainly for user-produced content, but you're not obliged to upload photos of your own if you don't want to. But there are a lot of thematic groups when you can see a lot of high-quality images of people who have visited, for example, a lot of ancient sites. And this is on many occasions georeferenced, so there is a map which shows you where exactly this image was taken in, and also different copyright regimes of using these images. Some of them are copyrighted, some of them are under Creative Commons license, which is a good idea to explore. It gives a lot of flexible possibilities to use and share content on the web. And you can also, if you wish, especially nowadays that all of us are basically locked in our houses, and if you want to go back to times where you roamed ancient sites and touristic sites freely, you can also contribute with some pictures of your own from different ancient sites or museums or places like that, with related content to classics, to the ancient world, and so on and so forth. And you can interact with that, which is a very not very burdening and at the same time useful way to also work on topics which you on one way or another have to work on while being locked down for quarantine. So I now at the end of this session, I propose you as an exercise which you have on the wiki page, to grab a text or something else, maybe secondary literature or a monument or something that you're currently reading or have to deal with as a part of your curriculum in classics or in ancient studies, and choose a topic for research. It could be a historical or literary figure, for example, Seneca, Burrus, Nero, Pliny the Elder, I don't know what, a period of time, early Principate, late Antiquity, I don't know, first centuries of Christianity, a place, Antioch, Ostia, or Köln, Colonia, Ulpia, Agrippina, or an object, for example, mirrors in antiquity, papyrus scrolls in antiquity, and search for relevant information on the topic on several platforms. For example, for images, as I showed you, Wikimedia Commons, Pinterest, or Flickr. Or maybe, or information on another sharing platform, which is SlideShare, where a lot of people are sharing slides on different topics that they had to prepare on occasion of their studies or teaching or something like that. Or another option, educational videos or videos from academic events, for which you can use Google Video Search, for example. If you have not tried to make a topical search connected with your studies on Google Video Search, you will be surprised how much lectures, training courses, or academic events or museum presentations are there on YouTube and on other places linked to topics of research such as, for example, late antiquity. Here I'm doing a random search, and a lot of different things pop out. So after you have done this and after you have come up with some results, think about what are the types of materials that you found. Are they, some of them should be strictly scholarly and of very high academic quality. Some of them are even close to peer-reviewed materials. Some of them are educational for different levels of education, for secondary education, for university education, and some of them are purely popular, crowdsourced and not very detailed, or maybe with details which need further checking. What would be the criteria by which you can estimate the suitability and then reliability of what you found? Which materials suit best your purpose? Which materials are the more reliable, and why? What is the accessibility of materials that you found? Which ones you can use and reuse, and under what conditions? Are they copyrighted? Are they public domain? Are they under different Creative Commons licenses, which if you don't know them, you can get acquainted with in this link. And out of all this, and don't get too distracted because you will get lost, but this is something, this is also something that is very useful to acquire as a skill, to know how to organize your information mining, so to say, and know how and when you have to stop. And can you create, out of what you have found, a coherent story? For example, can you make it into a presentation or a small encyclopedia article, for example, which you can with which you can contribute to your local Wikipedia, or a research case study about something? And what would be its basic structure? First point, second point, third point, and here this presentation goes here, and these images are discussed there, and things like that. And at the end, last but not least, which Monica pointed in our discussion before, how do you estimate the availability of sources and material on the given topic in your native language, especially compared with other languages in which materials are to be found? English, French, German, and Spanish, Russian. And if the availability of sources and materials in your particular native language is scarce, especially compared with information on Seneca, let's say in English or German, are you able to do something about it? For example, plan writing a Wikipedia article or sharing some photos or presentations on the platforms which I just show you with content and metadata in your native language. And of course, we can go on a lot, but I think I will stop here. Thank
okay,
you.
Dimitar, thank you very much, really, because so thank you for this really overview of many resources that we have been using, because we use them not only now in this summer where we have these difficulties in the summer semester. So we are a bit late, but that's okay, because already we had many things to see. We have questions and commentaries in the chat. I hope you can see the chat on the YouTube chat.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes, Gabi asks if we do something with the annotation students have created on these maps. Well, not for now. Not for now, but of course you can do this, and it's a very good idea to use them after they are created. I think that we need to go on another level and see how can we publish them then, because one of the possible things in which I think we can use stuff like this is to export them in XML and publish them using a platform such as Kiln or FS. But I have to say that this is something that we have not done until now, but this is something that one of the possible directions in which I think this can be moved further. And I'll be happy to discuss other possible things which can be used, especially if they're technically easier acquired. Anise, well, thank you. Interesting fact, during quarantine, since many of our colleagues teaching other disciplines are not going online, our students are dedicated more time to classics. Oh yes, that's definitely something which can be done. But this is another thing which probably is worth discussing: the inequalities, including social inequalities concerning access to digital tools and digital literacy. And this is a pressing issue that has been going on in academia since I don't know when, but now is becoming quite essential. And maybe this Sunoikisis semester will be a good opportunity to also discuss this and how we can address this. So yeah, well, thank you for these questions and comments.
Well, yes, certainly. I think that in spite of this very, very difficult situation for many people, we have an opportunity with Classicist for showing what we have been doing and for helping students, definitely. And well, Classicists don't get bored during the quarantine and during the lockdown, definitely not, because we have a lot of work to do. And the overwhelming part, definitely, is something I agree, especially for students. I understand that, for example, I have students in the first year of their academic curriculum, so I understand that I can't really imagine beginning my university without being in the class, but following everything online. Even if students nowadays are very good at using online resources, but I understand the difficulties. And another thing, fast research and fast learning. This is the problem, because it's also for classics. Classics was used to be slow in the past. Now it's fast because we have so many things to learn beyond classical sources, which is already a lot. But now using resources, navigating through many online resources, and then learning, in this case, computational techniques and other things. So this is the problem. We have extraordinary opportunities today also in a difficult situation like this. But on the other side, the first thing we have to learn and to teach our students is to select. Selecting, as you were mentioning, Demeter, with your excellent examples, this is the thing, selecting. We have so many resources online, and we are a bit older than our students, and sometimes I say, wow, if I could have all these resources, but I can understand on the other side is really difficult, and students can get lost. Anyway, unfortunately, I have to stop this session because our time is over, even if I would like to go on. But definitely, these topics that are in general fundamental, not only in Sunoikisis, but in general for digital classics, and for many other disciplines, will be discussed during this summer semester, definitely. So we will go back to these questions. We will try to show different resources, how to use them to help our students. Also because as part of Sunoikisis, usually we have training sessions in a class with our students where we meet them, but also this part of Sunoikisis this year is done online. So everything is online. So we can't sit with our students and really help them use these resources and answer their questions. So also Sunoikisis is totally, completely online. Anyway, so Demeter, thank you very much. It was great. And again, you have a complete class outline. Slides will be also on GitHub. And then we have 2 sessions next week and the following one, April 23 and April 30, about text-bearing objects, which is, of course, one of the most popular topics we have in Sunoikisis, because we work a lot on, in general, text-bearing objects, inscriptions, manuscripts. And so we will have those 2 weeks, we will have a new guest. So, and you will find this information on GitHub. So thank you very much to all of you for this. Yes, Dimitar, please.
Well, no, I just want to say thank you also.
Okay. So thank you very much to all of you, and have a good night for those, of course, in this time zone, a good day for other people in other time zones as usual, and see you next week. Okay, yeah. So bye.
Safe and calm.